Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Service Impact Podcast, where we're talking about the marketing things that make a difference to service businesses. And today, we're going to be talking about how service businesses can rank locally and get more customers. It's a big deal for local service companies. And to discuss it, I'm being joined right now by the Director of Digital for Outside Communications, Stacey Abler. Stacey, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Lance. How are you?
I am doing amazing. Are we less than 100 days to our football season?
Yes, I believe so.
We are.
So
we're in the doldrums.
Saw my thing show up on social that said we had 12 more Saturdays until the first game. So
I so love that. I so love that. And for those of you that have no idea what we're talking about, Stacey is a Georgia Bulldog fan, and I am an Oregon Duck fan, and we get to talk about digital marketing, ads, SEO, and just about every meeting that we have during the football season starts with football. So anyway, it's a wonderful, complete business relationship where we can inject some football. So for those of you that hate football, I am so sorry, and we're going to get to our podcast topic. But for service companies, SEO has changed dramatically in the last 20 years, to say the least. I mean, let alone here in the last few years. But as a channel, your local SEO channel is still a huge deal for service businesses. So let's get into it. Maybe you could just give some background on like what we mean, because it is so convoluted now. Like, what is local search? What does it constitute? And maybe you could provide that perspective here just to get going.
Yeah. So I think, from a local search perspective, what we're typically talking about is when a consumer is doing a near me search, they're doing a search that has some sort of local qualifier to it, or they're doing a search that is obvious to Google that it is a local search, even if they don't necessarily do that, right? So if I search restaurants open now, I didn't add the near me qualifier or the city or zip code or anything like that, but just the intent of that search shows Google that, I'm in Georgia, so I'm not driving to North Carolina to go to whatever the best restaurant is there. So it still has that local intent to it, even without those local qualifiers. But, it's very important to be able to show up like that because, in the restaurant example, if I'm looking for a restaurant near me, then I'm looking to go out to eat, right? It's very high intent searches that are happening when they have that local qualifier or a local intent behind the search.
So local SEO though, I mean, what are the different places that people will see it? Because I know that there's one place that everybody thinks that's local SEO. But there's more to it today. I mean, it's different today. So maybe you could get into the different places that local SEO can actually show up within the channel.
Yes. So we have like your traditional search results, which are getting pushed further and further down the page. That's where you just have your listings and your links to a website. You have your Google Business Profile listing, which is it would show up on desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. Typically has the image, it has your, website, phone number, whatever information that you've built out that profile listing with. You can also show up in maps. So that can happen when someone is doing a typical Google search or if they're actually searching within maps for your business. And then we also have the AI overview, which is now surfacing local results more and more. And then on top of that, we also have ads that can show up. So there are, multiple ad types that can show up from a local perspective. So there's really a lot of different ways that your business can show up when someone's doing that local search. And it's not a matter of just optimizing for one and calling it a day. We want to be able to show up in as many of those different places as possible to own that search, so to speak, when someone is looking for your product or service.
Yeah, and I think initially, like as you were talking about the typical search results that show up. I think a lot of people attribute those results to organic search. And while it may be, there's local intent, and you mentioned the word intent. Google's been working on intent now for about 7-8 years and trying to understand what people are meaning. Is this a local search? Is this whatever? And there's also another channel that is emerging. So we've got the AI channel, but we've also got this crazy channel now that more and more people are using called ChatGPT. And we've got these other search type tools that are out there. We've got Gemini, which was, last time I checked, was trash. We've got other stuff like on X that's kind of this evolving, that's developing for search. But just on ChatGPT, just the other day, I was doing some research around something I needed, and it basically gave me the result of this particular plant that I was looking for in my garden, in our garden. And at the end of the result, I was just taking it through its prompts. I live in this location. I'm looking for this type of plant that's going to grow well. And here's the attributes. I want it to smell good. I want it to be this color. I want it to be about 1.5 feet high and have this amount of sun exposure. And it gave me all the lists of the plants that were available. And then I asked ChatGPT, could you please find some local nurseries where I can acquire these plants? And out it popped. It popped out these amazing local search results. And it even went in and checked where they had mentioned these particular species of plants in their website. And then that was the result. So we've got this entire world that is also developing outside of just Google. And that is deriving these results from, my gosh, it's got to be Google that ChatGPT is getting these results, or Bing or whatever. But my gosh, it's like we used to just deal with one of these, and now we've got 4 and possibly more that we're not even really getting into. So it's complex now.
Yes, definitely. And there's multiple different, LLMs. So the large language models that are out there are what most people think of as like a Chat GPT, AI, bot, those kinds of things. But there's a lot of them that are out there. You mentioned like Gemini, there's Claude, Chat GPT, OpenAI. The list goes on and on. And the same way that you would optimize differently somewhat for, say, like Google versus Bing to show up in search, you would also do the same for each one of these chatbots, because they're all learning in different ways to pick up, whatever information that they're going to surface. Obviously, Gemini, Google's is using Google search results, for a lot of things. And some of the other ones may be going to multiple different websites to grab content that they surface. So there's a lot of that is kind of up and coming, and people are still testing and trying to figure out how you get into AI overview results, or that you show up in Chat GPT when someone's looking for something. But it's definitely changing the way that search works. Because, something that used to take tons of research, and I've got to do multiple searches, and I've got to put through multiple websites and all that. Now I can just put that information into ChatGPT or one of the others and let it do all of that work for me and surface all of the information. And so I think it's changing search in general, the behaviors of people, the way that people interact with even a search engine now based on how they've been interacting with ChatGPT. So things are becoming even more conversational with the way that people are searching. And so those are more things that you need to be able to optimize your website for, so that you're showing up for these more conversational searches versus how most people are still doing SEO, which is like very specific keyword driven. And obviously the keywords are still important. They're always going to be important, but you need to be able to, show up for those more conversational searches. And when people are asking questions, do you have those questions on your website with answers? Those are the kinds of things that can help you to show up more, as people are changing the way that they search and behavior is continually shifting.
So some people are listening to this right now, Stacey, and they're saying, well, hey, man, I'm not a pizza delivery outfit, and I'm not a local HVAC company. But for even companies that are like more B2B oriented, this same stuff applies. And I think that there's like this propensity within the B2B world, whether it's industrial services or anything in that world, SaaS, you name it, where it's like, oh yeah, we don't really need this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, you're spending the money on ads, and here's your search results that are actually getting your ads clicked through on, but yet those same results are actually showing up with SEO, except you're not doing anything on it. So for B2B companies, how where does this all fit into it? Because a lot of these B2B companies, they might have a location here, and they've got a location over there, and they've got a location in Georgia. They've got a location in Oregon. I mean, this is starting to get a little bit complex. So I want to kind of shift from some of our local to some of our companies that really do have like expansive local networks, and really haven't even tapped into them yet. And we see them every day. For those of you out there that are thinking that Home Depot doesn't do any of this, yes, they do. But there's a ton of service businesses out there that have so much meat on the bones and so much opportunity, and they haven't even started to tap into this. So maybe you could talk about this and kind of maybe this ecosystem that needs to happen in order for companies like this to be successful locally.
Yes. So, when you have multiple locations, then you still want to have that hyper local approach for that particular, market. So if, I'm selling widgets and I have a widget store in Atlanta and one in Portland, then, I don't necessarily need to show up if somebody just searches widgets, right? Because I'm only really relevant to Atlanta and Portland. But I want to make sure that I have that local strategy for every location that I have, so that when someone is searching in that area or with those local qualifiers or whatever it may be, that I'm still showing up for each one of my locations. And I want it to be as specific as possible to that particular search. So whether you have one location and you serve people within a 10-mile radius of that location, and that's all you care about, or you've got 1,500 locations across the country and you're serving people around a radius of each one of those, then you still would apply that same strategy that the one business, local person is applying, but you're going to do it to each one of those locations. And obviously that's a huge undertaking from a management standpoint to keep up with all of the Google listings, the Bing listings, where you're showing in Yellow Pages, Yelp, Angie's List, whatever it is where your listings are showing up as far as, address, phone number, those kinds of things, but also from a search perspective. And one of the big things that we recommend is having those location specific pages on your website, so that when someone is searching for that more localized product or service, then when they land on your website, they're landing on that location specific page, and that feels like a much more relevant experience for them than hitting the home page where they don't know if you're really offering that in their area or not. But again, that can be a huge undertaking because, going back to like 1,500 locations, right? You can't take that one location page, replicate it 1,500 times on your website, and just flip out a city name and call it a day. So that's, not going to work. So we need to be able to have specific content for each one of those locations to really get the best bang for our buck out of doing that. And then those pages have to be updated on a regular basis. So it can be a huge undertaking when you're talking about, hundreds of dozens, whatever the number is, locations across the country, and you're having to implement this strategy for each one of those.
Yeah, it is, and it could be, I think that's why a lot of companies just don't deal with it. They basically just list everything. They've got all their major service pages for their website, and then they don't even really think about the opportunity beyond that. They've never been presented with the opportunity beyond that. They don't think it'll work for them or whatever, or the headquarters is in one location, and so they look through the lens that, we're in Seattle, and they don't really look through the lens of saying, hey, we could dominate Dallas. We could dominate Washington, D.C. It's really interesting. And for those that are of you that are listening that are, veterans at this stuff and really understand a lot about this, you're like, well, how do they, how would they not understand this? And it's like, you would be absolutely shocked at the size of the companies that we deal with that have never, ever made SEO of any type a priority for their entire existence. And I had an interesting conversation with a very large multi-billion-dollar company, one of their main people, and he couldn't figure out, they were so reputable and so well known, and he could not figure out why some of these smaller companies were actually getting business. And I asked him, and I ran a couple things for him, and just software, just crawls and stuff like that. And I said, have you guys ever done anything with your SEO or your local search? He says, no, we've never done that. It's not for us. And I was like, well, every one of the companies that you mentioned, that is a high priority for them. And I was able to show him the differences in what these companies were doing and what this major, massive company wasn't doing. And basically these smaller companies were just chipping away at this big, huge company's market share. And what was interesting about it is they could have bullied that market so hardcore for years. They wouldn't have had to let anybody into it, and they just literally let people into that market. And so it's interesting. So for those of you listening that are like, oh, this is just a small business problem, you would be shocked at how many $100 million companies are not paying attention to this stuff. Am I crazy, Stacey?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot that, rely just solely on their brand name and figure that they don't have to do anything from a local level and that everybody just knows who they are and they're good. Whereas if, you're focusing in on that local level and all of, the different places where you do have locations or you offer products and services or whatever it happens to be, then, that's where you can really start to grow market share within that particular area. And you'll see the growth happening in certain cities, across the nation, instead of just looking at kind of this nationwide presence that you have and hoping that when someone in small town USA searches that you're going to show up without having that local intent. What they're likely going to see show up in search is that business like you were talking about that is working on that and is trying to show up for that local search because that seems more relevant to what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah, no question. Stacey Abler is joining me. She's the digital director of digital at Outside Communications, and we're talking about our our local search presence and how service businesses can kind of lean into the SEO opportunities that they have. And so many companies do a great job of this. So many local companies do a great job of this, but there's just so many, and it's just surprising how many actually don't, and how much opportunity they're really leaving just for other people to pick up. And there's bread on the table, and the other person's picking it up, and with it, that market share as well. Our next subject in our discussion is about reviews, and I want to kind of pivot away from local, hyper-local service companies, because I know that's easy to go to. But let's stay on these companies that are, let's say, more B2B, that tend to neglect the review process. Because, like, you look at some of the HVAC companies we work with, they are like dog on a bone on a review. I mean, they get them. I mean, they've got hundreds, they've got, 1,000, 5-star reviews, and they are just all over it. And that social proof is so important. And I don't think you have to convince a home service company or even a restaurant that that's the case. But let's turn 3 degrees to our B2B clients. And I guess on this same topic that we've discussed, how a lot of these customers haven't necessarily engaged the review process in the same way that some of these smaller local companies have. What difference could it make for a large consulting firm that is got these locations but hasn't made this a priority?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a huge difference. I think it makes just as much of a difference for that B2B company as it does for the hyperlocal service provider. So, when 80% of people are using Google as their search engine from a review perspective to go out and to read reviews and to learn about a company. And so people are going to look for that. Right. And they're going to see, like, what can I expect when I work with them? What can I expect when I reach out to them? What's the follow-up process? What's the support after they make the sale? All those things, they want to be able to learn that. And the way they're learning that is from reading reviews from real people. And, when you have the reviews that are on this third-party site, so to speak, like Google, then they tend to be more trustworthy. Because, if you have them on your own site, then you can just curate all the 5 stars and call it a day, right? And you get more of like a true picture when you're looking at Google. And so when you're going and you're doing a search and you see a company that has 2 reviews, even if it's 5 stars, it doesn't look as great as the one that maybe is even like a 4.8, but it's on 250 reviews. Like, that's 250 votes for this company, right? And they still have a higher rating versus this one that only has 2. Like, I don't know. I mean, how good of a job could they be doing if there's only 2 people that even are taking the time to brag about whatever service it was that they had for them? So I think it's super important to have that review management and that review process that goes into place so you can solicit reviews, so you can, build up that presence. So that people are able to get that information and have that social proof and have, the confirmation from other people that, hey, this business is, trustworthy. They do what they say, they deliver. So I think it's very important, and it's a big miss if a business is neglecting reviews.
Yeah. And it's so easy to do, especially if you've done a good job for somebody. I mean, just being able to say, hey, how important reviews are today. If you thought we did a good job, I'd love to send you a link and for you to be able to maybe fill something out on Google that says how we did. And most clients that like you, that appreciate what you did, will take the time to do that. And It's not a big ask for people. People know how important it is, and they know how they themselves shop. And really, I think the thing that is missing is just asking. This is pretty easy stuff. You got to just ask for the review, and then if you, I can just say this: make it a KPI and measure it. In other words, if you want to really grow this part of your business, make it a KPI, check in on it, and incentivize your team, however, to get these reviews and make sure they're asking. Some people are just uncomfortable asking for reviews. I don't know why, but incentivize them then to get these, because the distance that you could put between yourself and your competition could be significant. And I mean that in the sense that a lot of B2B companies in less developed marketing industries, and there's a lot of them, and people think that everybody's like all doing it awesome. There are entire industries that have developed almost nothing because everybody's like, oh, we do things with a phone call and a handshake, and we've got reps out in the field. And it's like, okay, that's great. And everybody thinks like that in the industry. And that's exactly where the opportunity is like, all you have to do, it's like, there it is. There's the 16-ounce New York strip laying there, ready to be eaten. All you have to do is go put a fork and a knife in it. And 2 to 3 years down the road, by the time everybody in your industry wakes up and goes, gosh, look what they're doing, you are 2 and 3 years ahead of where they would be in your review process, in your local infrastructure process, in your SEO process. Okay, I'm going to step out of our topic, in your ads process. I mean, that infrastructure takes time to build, and it's like, it's shocking how many large companies have never had a strategy for this, and it's, I'm not sure why, other than they just either at the top haven't had the vision, or in the marketing department just haven't had the know-how necessarily to do the strategy. And but at that point, if you don't know, get some help. Whether it's us or whether it's somebody else, it's like, just get some help, because man, there is so much opportunity to make a difference if this isn't something that you've tuned in on. So let's our final topic. I don't want to leave it on a negative, but mistakes. Like, besides everything I just said of not doing it, like, please do it. Okay, so we'll leave that one out of it. But let's get into some common mistakes that service businesses make in their SEO strategy.
Yeah, so I think one of the first ones is neglecting the Google Business Profile. So it's something that's so easy to set up. It's free. That's one thing that Google hasn't monetized yet. So something that you can go and you can get that free listing that is there. And there's so many businesses that don't do it. Or they set up the listing, they add one photo, maybe, and then they never do anything else with it again. And there's so much opportunity to be able to really optimize that listing, and to also be able to update it on a regular basis, so that you can continue to have those interactions and to have new information for your consumers, and you can have your promotions out there, or whatever it is that you're doing that's new and exciting, or, whatever it is that's going on, something that you would want people to know about when they're searching for you. So I think that is a big miss, is when people don't have the Google Business Profile at all, or when they go in and they're like, hey, I added my address and my phone number, I'm good. There's so much more opportunity there beyond just doing the very basic setup that's required to just have the listing. So I think that is one of the big things. Another that we see often is the number of people who are not tracking correctly or tracking at all. So they're not looking at, where are their leads coming from? Where are their phone calls coming from? So that like, what's your conversion rate? What is the profitability of a customer that comes from, someone who types in your website versus clicks on an ad versus comes via SEO versus comes via your Google business profile. And being able to see that, like, hey, my highest dollar, my highest profitable customers are coming from search. Well, then you know where you really need to focus. And that's not to say that you ignore the other things, because they can always be optimized to improve as well. But it just gives you an idea of what's working and what's not, and where you need to put additional effort. Where can you put additional dollars? So that every dollar that you're investing and every minute that you're investing into optimizing your marketing is going toward the thing that's going to bring you the highest revenue and net profit. But if you're not tracking that, if you're not tracking where your leads are coming from, where your phone calls are coming from, whatever your conversion point happens to be, you can't do that. And so we need to be able to have all that tracking set up so that we know every single phone call that happens, every single form fill that happens, every single chat interaction on your website, every single purchase, whatever it is, what drove it? Because that is what determines what our future marketing strategy is and where our efforts should be focused in either expanding or optimizing a service or a channel that maybe is not doing as well. And then the last one, I think, is targeting keywords that are too broad. So everyone wants to, rank. I want to be number one for super broad keywords. So just going back to the football thing, we'll say for football t-shirts. And yeah, I mean, sure, it's great to be number one. It's like bragging rights that you hit number one for a particular search. But someone who's searching football t-shirts is still like a pretty generic search. And it's not really giving you a lot. So I could click on that and I could see, 100 different schools, none of which are probably relevant to me. Versus if I say, hey, I want to rank number one when somebody searches for University of Georgia football t-shirt, because that person is looking for a very specific product, right? They've said that in the search, and they're much more likely to actually convert. So the more specific the search is, then typically the higher intent the search is, which means that you're driving more qualified traffic to your website, and those people who are more likely to take whatever your conversion action is, whether it's a form fill, contact, call, a purchase, whatever it happens to be. So, if you go back to like a service business example, for somebody who says, I want to rank for a plumber. It's like, okay, I mean, sure, that's great. But the one that is really going to drive money, where they say, the riches are in the niches, is when you can rank well for emergency plumber in Houston, Texas, emergency plumber near me, emergency plumber open 24/7. Like, that person needs a plumber right now. And that's the search that you want to be there for, because with that, they're ready to become your customer. And so you want to make sure that you're showing up well for those searches and you're putting in your focus in on that, versus trying to hit like a super generic term that may or may not have the intent behind it.
Thank you for joining us today on this edition of the Service Impact Podcast. If you'd like more content just like this in relationship to service business marketing, you can head over to serviceimpact.com for more episodes, summaries, information, and ways that you can get in touch with us at Outside Communications. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.